Welcome back to the deep dive. So, following up on our last discussion in episode 9, we looked at ketamine, how it can sometimes lift mood really quickly for people with depression.
Right, that rapid antidepressant effect is definitely a big part of why it's generated so much interest. It's quite different from traditional treatments in that sense.
But like we mentioned, that initial boost, well, it doesn't always last as long as hoped.
Exactly, and that's the challenge.
Which brings us to today's focus. We're building on that idea of ketamine's quick start, but looking at something pretty fascinating, using automated tools maybe to help those positive effects stick around longer.
Yeah, that's the core question. Can we sustain that initial improvement? And the research we're diving into explores using, well, interactive computer programs, think apps, or even game-like tools.
Okay, so not just playing Candy Crush, I take it.
No, not quite. These are designed specifically to interact with the brain's processes,
Yeah.
sort of like targeted exercises
Yeah.
to help solidify the positive changes ketamine might initiate.
Right, you mentioned this concept, neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
It's the brain's ability to, you know, change and reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. Think of it like ketamine might temporarily make the brain more flexible, more open to learning new patterns.
Like it creates a window of opportunity.
Precisely. A window where we could potentially reinforce more positive ways of thinking or feeling.
Okay, that makes sense. And this idea has led to actual tools being developed.
It has.
Yeah.
One example that's quite relevant is an app called Rejoyn. It actually received FDA authorization.
Rejoyn. Okay, what is that exactly?
It's a prescription digital therapeutic.
Yep.
So a doctor prescribes it. It's for adults, 22 and older, with major depressive disorder who are already taking antidepressant medication.
Important point. It's used with medication and under a doctor's care.
Absolutely. It's an adjunct therapy meant to complement clinician-managed outpatient care, not a replacement.
And what does it do?
It provides a 6-week program. It combines exercises that are kind of like brain training with short, skills-based therapy lessons. The whole idea is to tap into that neuroplasticity we were just talking about, help rebuild connections, maybe rework how emotions are processed, and ultimately reduce depression symptoms.
Has it been tested? What did they find?
Yes, there were clinical trials. The results showed that adding Rejoyn to standard antidepressant medication led to a greater reduction in depression symptoms compared to medication alone.
And side effects?
Interestingly, there were 0 side effects reported related to the app itself in those trials. People using it, on average, reported their depression severity drop, say, from moderately severe down to mild. Clinicians saw a similar shift.
So how does this connect back to ketamine specifically? Is Rejoyn used with ketamine?
Well, Rejoyn itself isn't specifically indicated for use with ketamine in its current authorization. But the principle is highly relevant. The idea that ketamine increases plasticity, making the brain more receptive. Well, that's exactly the kind of state where a tool like Rejoyn, designed to reinforce positive changes, could theoretically be very useful. It capitalizes on that enhanced learning state.
Okay, I see the connection now. And this concept using training after ketamine, wasn't that something we touched on before in episode 9?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
We discussed a study using something called automated self-association training, ASAT for short.
Right, ASAT chatter. Remind us what that was.
It was a fully automated, computer-based training. And its goal was specifically to target self-worth, kind of how you feel about yourself, using a technique called evaluative conditioning, basically learning by association.
And in that study, they did this after the ketamine infusion.
Yes, that was the setup. Participants got either ketamine or placebo infusion, and then they did this ASAT training. It was twice a day for 4 days, I believe, about 20 minutes each time.
And the focus was on negative self-beliefs, things like, I'm worthless.
Exactly. Those core depressive self-schemas. The hypothesis was that the period right after ketamine might make these ingrained negative beliefs, well, more malleable, easier to change.
So what did the actual ASAT task look like?
The active ASAT involved repeatedly pairing positive words, things like sweet, good, attractive, and positive images, like smiling faces,
Okay.
with self-related cues. So words like I or me, and even the participant's own photograph. There were also some other simple tasks mixed in, like deciding if letters formed a word.
And there was a control version? A sham.
A sham ASAT. It used similar tasks, but paired neutral words and images with cues related to other people like they, others, and photos of strangers. So no positive self-association happening there.
And the results of that study were pretty striking, as I recall.
They really were. The group that got ketamine plus the active ASAT showed significantly lower depression scores, and crucially, those scores remained low and stable over the next 30 days.
Compared to.
Compared to, for instance, the group that got a placebo infusion but still did the active AS, their scores weren't as low or stable.
And what about ketamine plus the sham training?
That group showed an initial improvement from the ketamine, which we'd expect, but it tended to fade over time.
So that really suggests it wasn't just getting ketamine and it wasn't just doing any computer task afterwards.
Exactly. It points towards the active, positive self-association training being pretty critical for maintaining the benefit from the ketamine infusion.
The combination seemed key. Did the ASAT alone do anything? The placebo plus active AS group.
There was a little hint, maybe, of some small benefit from the active AS, even with the placebo infusion, but the big effect was the synergy between ketamine and the active training.
This is really interesting. It seems like there's this whole emerging idea, almost like ketamine games.
You could definitely frame it that way. In fact, we even saw a website, literally ketamine.games, exploring this concept.
Really? What's their approach?
Well, their stated goal is pretty direct.
Mm.
Boost self-worth, prolong the effects of ketamine, nurture joy, help people see themselves happy. Sounds quite similar to the ASAT principles, doesn't it?
It really does. How do they suggest doing it?
They talk about using self-affirming messages, positive reinforcement, looking at smiling faces, including your own or loved ones. It seems focused on similar positive association building.
And customizable too, maybe.
Yeah, they mentioned customizing images, messages, timings, maybe even different game formats. It seems like a more flexible, maybe user-driven approach based on those core ASAT ideas.
So whether it's a structured app like Rejoyn or the specific ASAT protocol or these broader ketamine games ideas, what are the bigger implications here?
Well, I think one major implication is the potential for a practical, efficient way to extend ketamine's benefits. These are automated tools that can be relatively low cost, scalable.
And potentially used at home. Didn't the ASAT study mention that?
Yes, the ASAT was designed for potential home use. And the adherence in that study was incredibly high, like 97% completion rate. That suggests people found it acceptable and were willing to do it.
That's a really good sign for engagement.
It is. Now, it's probably important to keep expectations realistic. As the researchers noted, these tools might be more about stabilizing the gains made from ketamine, rather than necessarily deepening the antidepressant effect even further.
Okay, so locking in the improvement rather than pushing for more.
That seems to be the thinking. The synergy makes sense. Ketamine for the rapid relief and increased plasticity, followed by this targeted learning to solidify positive changes during that window.
And research is ongoing, right? You mentioned looking at different doses or more training.
Yes, the episode 9 paper discussed future directions like repeated ketamine doses, maybe multiple courses of AS booster sessions down the line, or even targeting different kinds of negative associations. Lots to explore still.
Of course, there are limitations noted too.
Like not having a group in that ASAT study that got ketamine plus just standard therapy to compare against.
Yeah.
And the challenge of blinding with ketamine, people often know if they've received it.
Though the blinding for the ASAT part itself was probably better.
Yes, much more feasible to blind whether someone got the active or sham computer task.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what's the core message you think people should take away?
For me, it's the really exciting potential here. Combining ketamine's fast action with these kinds of automated, targeted training tools, like ASAT, could offer a pathway to more durable relief from depression. It's about leveraging that plasticity window.
Yeah, using technology to actively engage the brain's own ability to change to help sustain those initial improvements.
Exactly.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Beyond just ketamine and depression. Consider the broader idea. How else could we use technology to tap into neuroplasticity, to enhance, to extend the benefits of various therapies across mental health?
That's a great point.
What other areas could benefit from these kinds of approaches that empower people to actively shape their recovery, even outside the therapist's office? Something to definitely ponder.